You know, most of us think we have a cool job until we meet someone who really has a cool job. You are a design lead at Facebook Reality Labs. Could you tell us what that title means? It sounds cool, even just the title.
Facebook Reality Labs is the new name for the organization that I've been part of for the last 5 years. We just rebranded to this name. It's the combination of all the efforts in technology that Facebook is doing for the future. So it's everything from artificial intelligence to XR or virtual reality and augmented reality. It's all the forward-thinking technologies. And so that's the area of work that I'm part of. Specifically, I'm the design lead for avatars. And avatars is the effort to build embodiment for people as they interact in the future of computing. So basically, one day, instead of us maybe talking this way, separated by a screen, imagine a future where you would call me and say, hey, Dino, let's meet up. And you, Jannelle, and myself would be somewhere and we can decide wherever we want to be. We could be here in Alki Beach, or maybe somewhere in San Francisco or Texas. That's for us to decide, or maybe someplace completely virtual and imaginary. And we would do that as avatars of ourselves, meaning we wouldn't be bound by a screen, and we would be three-dimensional beings in this virtual space. And that's the area that I'm working on.
Looking good.
Isn't that cool? And then you talked about avatar. Of course, I have to ask, everyone's been posting their avatars on Facebook. Is there any trick, any tips, any kind of like behind the scenes stuff about that you can share with us? Something coming up maybe?
Yeah, only that the stuff that we've already announced, which is that we are very committed as a team to create more opportunities for inclusion and diversity. By that, I mean, the version that we have right now, it's great. You can probably make a version of yourself very easily, but there's so many more ways we can make it better. More representative hairstyles, for example, for people of color. Or how about like, asymmetry, meaning what if somebody has a mole on one side of their face versus the other, or their hair is parted the other way. Wrinkles, things that represent age and maturity, disabilities, things that are important in our ability to express ourselves. We're working on all these things. So over time, you'll have more of these come up. And so this is the kind of thing that my team is working on.
All right, exciting. Must be nice working for such a well-known global company like Facebook, who has also been at the forefront. You mentioned, you know, Facebook future. Seldom do we hear those two words separated. You know, normally when you talk about Facebook, you think about the future and vice versa. So what's it like working there, and what's a typical day like for you?
Yeah, obviously, as you can imagine, it's changed a lot because of the pandemic. But it's great, right? So before all this, I should start there. The experience for me was either going to the Menlo Park office or being here at the office in Seattle and being surrounded by the latest of technology. And one of the things that I can say about the company is that it's very open. You've heard about like other tech companies being very closed off. Like Apple is notoriously very closed off, where even if we were working in the same organization, you might not know what I know and I might not know what you know. That's not how it is in Facebook. Facebook is a very open company, to the point where the culture is built around expressing what you're working on to the rest of the organization and telling people what you're doing. And so people are always aware of the things that are happening within the company. It's a very humbling and like exciting place to be because of that. You're always surrounded by new ideas. You're always surrounded by new exciting ways to do things. And people have built the whole culture around like sharing and telling people what's new. And so it's a great environment. And so that's how it was, but then, and now it's about the same. Like it's just now more virtual. In fact, I've made it a lot easier. If there was a meeting going on in Zurich, or maybe a meeting going on in an office in London, you can easily just jump into the meeting and see what's going on and be aware of what's going on, even outside of the product that you're working on.
Right. So your cool-o-meter has just gone up again. Like it just keeps going up. I'm very happy that you're choosing to share your experience with us. Also to encouraged more to try a career in this field. When you look back on your career in tech, what would be the top 3 things that stand out that you think led you to this position?
Got it. That's a really really good question. I think it's hard to answer this one without getting a little bit more critical of us as Filipinos and our culture, and how do we step out of some of the things that are pitfalls, and maybe highlighting some of our strengths to step forward, right? So I think we as a culture, for better or for worse, tend to be very self-aware, to the point where I think we're so careful not to upset others. And what that tends to foster is that we're probably not asking the right questions. We're also probably not asserting ourselves in meetings. And we're also probably not telling people how things should be done, even though we might know. And so all to say that, and this might be controversial, but sometimes to succeed, we have to step out of these cultural norms that we're born with, right? So I find myself, even now, for example, speaking in very vague terms, right? So meaning, as a culture, it's normal for us to say medyo, konti, sana, or siguro. Like, those are part of our vernacular. And so that translates to English. When I say things, I say, I kind of think this, or maybe I sort of believe this. And we use these words like sorta and kinda in our language. And I've realized that those are words that disempower what you're trying to say. And so I've made it a goal to stop saying those words. I shouldn't say kinda. I shouldn't say sorta. I shouldn't say maybe. I should say yes, no, and this is why. And so the first thing I would say is, I think we need to be more assertive, and that's something that I've had to learn. That's not something I was born with.
Right. And let me just say that this is very powerful what you're doing, Dino, because also October is Filipino-American History Month. And you know, as somebody like yourself who grew up in the Philippines, I also grew up in the Philippines, and that's why we're aware of that culture. And in that culture, in the Philippines, it's the norm. And so here, you're right. When we bring it over here and we're not aware that that's not the way things work here, it works to our detriment. A lot of the time, we have to be honest about that. When we're not sure, where we're unsure, also the Filipino culture of being timid, don't rock the boat. So we don't ask questions. And we're not encouraged to ask questions. And so thank you for bringing that up, because like I said earlier, Filipino-American History Month, this is a time for us to reflect and celebrate what we have already contributed to this country, but then at the same time, what more we can do.
Yeah. And
this is very helpful that you're talking about always asking questions, right? And being assertive of ourselves. What second thing?
I think the second one would just be also, don't necessarily like go all the way that way and forget everything that makes you empathic. So this is something that I've realized about myself, is that there's this ongoing push and pull between being Western and being like where we are. And one side of us is, let's become more confident. And the other side is, be more compassionate. And sometimes in that battle, we forget that they don't have to be one or the other. Like in that journey to be more confident, people forget to be compassionate. And don't forget that, right? Because I think the hard skills are only as good as your soft skills. I see people who go all the way one way, and they forget that the reason why they're even where they are is because they were good listeners and they were aware of other people's feelings. And so all to say that, you know, even in the first step one is great, like be more confident, but don't forget the other stuff. Don't forget the thing that brought you there. And so that's a simple one, just be compassionate.
And I like that too, because it's also something that I think is lacking these days. Yeah. I don't know if you're aware, like if you go social media, we have become such an angry, anxiety-ridden society that every little thing turns us off, you know, makes us go berserk. It's not good. we have to meet people, we have to try to meet people where they're at. And I always say this, we can't ask understanding and tolerance from people if we ourselves are not willing to give it.
That's so true.
So I like that. Your number 2. So your first is always ask questions. Number 2 is be compassionate. Like, you know, stay true to your core, right?
Yep.
And then your third point.
The last one is also very specifically Filipino, I think, which is that keep being innovative. If you think about like us as a culture, and maybe I'm very hyper-focused on me and yourself being from the Philippines, we come from a culture where we probably had less. And so we tried new ways to do things. And necessity is always the mother of invention. We know that. And just embrace that. And that's true of technology too. Find the need. Find the reason why you can't do something right. Like if you wake up in the morning and there's one thing that you're trying to do that's impossible to do, you usually find a solution around it. And it's true of tech. Tech is all about finding solutions to problems that people don't know how to solve yet. And I think us being Filipinos have that inherent ability to solve problems. And so be innovative, be true to that, and you'll realize that it's that thinking out of the box that allows you to succeed. Like there's so many ways I've seen that happen at work, where especially in the culture that I'm in at work, it's like how do I explain this? A lot of the solutions that we have at work are based on like problems that exist in the world, and it's no greater than a Filipino mind to figure out the solutions to those things.
I love that. That's very inspiring. But you know what, Dino, you know, we talk about how the technology is advancing humanity. It's forward looking toward the future, making our lives easier, but it has also affected us negatively. Mm-hmm. Right? Recently, a lot of buzz has been generated by The Social Dilemma on Netflix. And it's also making us think that the technology also has scary effects. Like you're a parent, I'm a parent. And it actually really made me scared or fearful as to how to approach social media, how to approach technology. The Social Dilemma included experts that claim to be experts that claim that there are things that are happening behind the scenes that we are not aware of, things to control and manipulate us. Your thoughts on that, as somebody from in there? Are you able to talk about that?
Yeah. So I haven't seen the film, so it's hard for me to comment directly, but I understand the gist of what you're bringing up. And it's the truth of it is that it's on us. I'm going to talk from the parent side real quick before I talk about like
public side
from someone coming from tech. But as a parent, I think the responsibility on our part is to just be very hyper aware of what our children are doing. I think the mistake here that is often made is that, you know, technology makes something easier, ergo you just let them go do that. It's no different from the time when we were young and we were raised on TV. Have we been raised on TV? Maybe not, but that was what our parents did. And so I think the responsibility is really on the parents, is partly on us parents to make sure that we are aware of what our children are doing. And really the key thing is to make sure that none of the things our children are doing is exposing personal information from them. Right? That's important, right? So if they can function within usernames and code names, or when they play their Roblox or whatever, better. Just if there's an option to turn off the chat so they don't have to be heard or they don't have to talk, that's better. Like user due diligence. Like I think the most straightforward rule is would you allow this behavior to happen in your home? And you know, if the answer is no, then don't do it, right? So it's that simple. So one way to test that rubric is if your daughter is now speaking to strangers, would you allow that in your home? And if the answer is no, then take that out of the equation. It's that simple. But now, talking from the technology standpoint, I'm not here to defend the company that I work for. I know there's a lot of sensationalized media about technology in general, or Facebook, of how the company is seen as doing bad things. All I can really speak for is how I feel about working in there. I've worked there now for 5 years. And I think from my perspective, and I'm not speaking for the company is actually very responsible with how we're handling data and how we're handling all this information. There's a lot of, if anything, the company's bad at PR is what I think it is. So one example I'm going to give you is very recently, we as a company announced that the new headset, the new Oculus headset we're releasing requires you to log on to Facebook to use it. The backlash is that many people were bothered by this. And people were up in arms saying, how could you ask for us to register to Facebook to use your product? And if you think about that statement real quick and just really dig into what that means, you're probably hearing people say, well, I'm scared because you're gathering data about me. And two, maybe I don't want you to know what games I'm playing. And all these things come up. And to that same person, I ask, when you use PlayStation, when you use Nintendo, when you use Xbox and you use your iPhone, you're logged on to the system to use these games. And so how different is that from Facebook? And so to that I say it's because Facebook has a bad reputation. And it's sensationalized that way. And I can't defend that, nor can I change that. But all to say that as someone working from the inside, we are very responsible and conscientious of how we're using this data. And more so now because people think that we're horrible at it, right? So that's all I have to say with that.
It's nice and it's refreshing to get somebody from that point of view. I just wanted to ask, sorry, it's not part of our thing, but since I have you on the phone and I have some parent friends who are like, oh no, I'm not going to post a photo of my kids on social media. It's not just on Facebook, let's talk about Instagram or all these other social platforms. And some of them do and some of them don't. And some of them, create accounts for some of us, I have created an account for my daughter and some don't. Your thoughts on that? Is there something to that idea that you shouldn't or you should?
I think this is all down to your own personal choice, but I'll tell you what I do. I post photos of my child, partly because I'm away from family. Like most of my family is actually in the Philippines. And I also want a record of her growing up. So for me personally, I've documented my daughter's life from the time she was born to now, excruciatingly, because I want my family to be able to see it. And I want to be able to comment. And this is my way of looking back at her life and seeing it as a whole. That said, I'm very careful about what is public and what's not, right? My wife and I have made sure that any pictures of my daughter are only visible by my friends. They're not like public photos. So there's those things you can do. But that's my choice. Every other parent should have their own. But personally, that's how I feel.
So I think this draws us to appreciating and first understanding what STEAM really is: science, technology, engineering, how it affects our lives. And this is what you're trying to do by being involved with a group called FASTER. How would you introduce FASTER to those who have not heard of it?
I have to admit that my exposure to FASTER has been minimal, but from what I've seen they're doing, they've done a great job of helping inspire and educate people into technology from our diaspora, or people from the Filipino upbringing, which is great, right? I've attended a couple of events where they went to Facebook, and I've seen Aaron work, and I love the thing that they do. I'm very inspired by the fact that they're reaching out and connecting young people to technology. I've been asked to come in and just do a panel about technology and what I do, amongst other creatives. So it's pretty exciting. Please join us at FasterCon. We'll see you there. It'd be really great to be inspired by others who will be there and hear them out, and also just hear from all of you as well.